So I just got off an amazing call with a bunch of Supreme Court experts about the remaining cases that the Supreme Court is going to be issuing decisions on in the next couple of weeks. I want to share it all with you. This is hugely important and will impact our lives in really big ways. The Supreme Court typically ends its term around July 1st. So what we were told is that there are 30 cases left, and of them, 15 are huge, like Dobbs level huge, Hobby Lobby level huge. These are big cases that are going to be earth-shattering, and there are 15 of them that we're going to hear about in the next couple of weeks. There's a few buckets on the remaining cases. One very important bucket is the two cases that have to do with Donald Trump and January 6th. And the first one, of course, being the immunity case. And here we are expecting more delay so that we just don't get to have this verdict before Election Day, which, by the way, goes against very much what the majority of Americans want. That is Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas, and maybe a couple of others, waving their insurrectionist flags symbolically. Never let them live it down. The other case is the Fisher case, and we are facing the very real possibility, and I quote, that the court will narrow the scope of one of the criminal obstruction charges against January 6th insurrectionists. So again, the MAGA majority ruling to protect insurrectionists rather than the American people. Just keep that in mind. Okay, then we have a bunch of admin law cases. Now, these sound really boring, and the names like Jarkizi and Chevron are just like your eyes just want to glaze over, but actually they can have a huge impact on us. I don't want to go into too much detail, but basically they will all have to do with whether the government can regulate things or whether the courts get to take that power away and then make their own decisions. And when you have right-wing justices stacked on the courts will rule for business, who wants to deregulate, which is extremely dangerous for Americans. And if they overturn the Chevron doctrine, for example, which we are hearing that they likely will, the government's ability to regulate things like pollution will be gutted. Okay, we've got Loper Bright. That is a case about a wealth tax. It was brought by people who are in the Koch network, and they want to prevent billionaires from being taxed. And so the Supreme Court is probably going to weigh in some way to benefit billionaires, again, because the majority was purchased by billionaires. Have I mentioned that? And we have two major abortion cases coming down, and the cases are Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine case, that is about mifepristone. They are trying to get rid of it or severely curtail it. I can tell you, having been in the reproductive healthcare hearing last week and listening to the line of questioning that Republicans were using, and also the answers by the individuals who were their witnesses, that this is going to be a major line of attack. Going against this medication in every way they can. This case is one approach, but even if the justices rule that the people who brought the case don't have standing, which is very possible, it doesn't mean that they support availability of these pills. It doesn't mean that they're not going to rule horribly in another case. They just think this is the wrong case. And of course, there's the EMTALA case. If you want a long breakdown on this, it's pinned to the top of my TikTok profile, but this is, of course, the one about whether or not states have to provide emergency health care to women who are in danger and come into an emergency room of a hospital that takes Medicare money. States like Idaho don't want to have to provide that emergency health care if it involves an abortion. The government says they should have to. The federal government, Biden, this is one that people think the Supreme Court could rule very badly on, and that will be catastrophic for women's health, period. You've got two gun cases. The Rahimi case, which is going to determine whether people who are domestic abusers can have their guns taken away. Just mind-blowing that we're even discussing this. The other one is a bump stock case. Does the ATF have the power to limit bump stocks? And this is just as important as the Rahimi case. If Supreme Court rules badly on this, it's just going to make it so much harder to pass common sense gun laws. And finally, we have City of Grants Pass. This has to do with whether municipalities can ban camping by unhoused people, and this could have huge ramifications for unhoused people across the country. So I know this is a lot, but here's the takeaway. The MAGA majority on the Supreme Court, their strategy right now is to consolidate power, to rule for the wealthy few, the billionaires that fund them, and to take away our freedoms. So we're about to get some decisions that are going to hurt. They're going to suck. It's going to be really painful. What I want to remind you is that we can change this, but we absolutely must elect Joe Biden in November. You can't worry about this and stay home, and you can't worry about this and vote third party, because should Trump win the election, he will likely have the chance to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices. True of Biden as well. Should he win, he will likely have that chance. So the next president will very likely get to determine the balance of power on the Supreme Court for the next many decades, right? We cannot allow this court to become more entrenched as a haven for billionaires and polluters and the NRA than it already is. So we're going to be upset by what we see come down in the next few weeks. We're going to be horrified. We're going to be angry. We got to be determined to get out there in November and start to undo the damage. Please don't forget it and tell a friend.